to become one with the self is not the same as knowing the self in the 3D reality, right? But it's the closest we can get, because what this 3D reality is the perception of self, right? So we're always going to have an ego, yet we can train our ego to see through the eyes of our true selves, which is the purpose of the Holy Spirit. That spirit is that energy that corrects the perception of the ego, right? When you let the ego die, when you take the red pill, so to speak, and see beyond the veil of perception, then you live in the place, then you decide to live from the perception of the higher self, right? Of the true self. And this perception is, it's not knowledge in the sense, but it's the closest that we can get to knowledge, because knowledge is the self, right? Knowledge is not the perception of self, but how we understand the self is through the perception of self in this 3D reality, because that's what 3D reality is. It is a perception, a projection of the self, right? So in order to make our lives better in this 3D world, we connect to the self so that we can live from the values of the self, from the values of love instead of the values of lovelessness, right? Instead of being afraid of not being whole and not being complete, because that's what lovelessness is, right? That's what evil is. The when you don't know who you are, you're afraid. You're afraid, and the ego is afraid. So the ego is anchored in that fear, right? So it acts out of that fear. So whether you need to, whether you're focused on fully protecting the self, right, and against attack, right, or whether you attack to protect yourself, or whether you there's so many ways that the ego can act heinously in order to protect what it's, what is there, what is the ego's, right? And the ego feels the need to protect because it feels like it has something to lose, right? It feels like it is temporary, right? So living through the ego is living through the perception that you are temporary. So you feel like you are temporary, and also everything in the world is of value, right? So when you value everything that you have and you believe that you are this temporary part of life, then you're going to try to protect yourself at all costs. You're going to be afraid in order to keep what is yours. But the truth of it is that you don't need to protect the ego, right? That's living in a loveless state. That's living in fear. That need to protect, that need to make big, that need to boast, right? And that need to be greedy, to get something, to fill in the self. That is the behavior of the ego without love, right? That's the behavior of the ego without the awareness of self. But when you're fully aware of self, life becomes happy again. Life becomes like a playground, because you don't need to protect the self. You know you have power, and you know you are part of the divine. So you starting to live through love is to learn to love the self and learn to love others. But it's also to get acquainted with the power that you have, right? The power to turn inward, and the power to go into to manipulate your consciousness, manipulate energy within this material realm. You know what I'm saying? Manipulate energy in terms of manifestation. Manipulate energy in terms of true creation, right? Whatever you're good at, whatever your thing is, learning to create it and to create more, and to get into the groove of what the things that you do and the things that you love and like to do. There's a whole world to discover that's a lot less stressful if we can simply change our perception, right? If we can simply learn to, if we put the effort forth to change our perception, right? It's not simply anything. It takes effort, it takes time. But once it does change, there's a reward on the other side. There's growth on the other side of it. when you become aware of the self, you're in communion with the higher self, right? So you have access to knowledge of the universe. You have access to ancient knowledge. So the work that you're doing goes toward, you have when you decide to get acquainted with the self, the energy and the work that you're doing goes towards that, goes towards the unknown, right? Because you no longer fear the unknown. You no longer fear energy. You no longer fear what you can't see and what you can't feel and what is tangible, You start to become curious of what else is out there, right? You start to become curious um, of what you can do, what your energy can do, how you can heal, right? You have energy that can how not only how you can heal, but how you can transform the self through your energy, right? How you can transform others through your energy. If you think of Jesus Christ, he got to a place where he was able to do any and everything through the manipulation of energy, right? He was able to walk on water. He was able to uh, um, make food out of little food. He was able to turn water into wine. He was able to uh, heal people, right? And he was like, others will do these acts and greater, right? He put no limit on us. We are the ones that put the limit on us. Jesus came and did and said that this is what everyone can do, right? He came as a representation, right? I'm a follower of Christ, right? And there's also other deities that show this same power. It's not only Christ, but I'm talking about Christ because that's what I know. That is who teaches me. You know what I'm saying? And other deities too that show the same benevolence. It's about all of us learning our power, right? It's about all of us getting to know the power of God, getting to know God through the self, you know.